Meetings are broadcast live on Spectrum Cable TV 1303 and web streamed at youtube.com/Town of Camden, Maine, all one word. So we'll start off with any public comment on non-agenda items. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none. Move on to the approval of the select board meetings from September 3rd, which are included in our packet. I like the transcription of these minutes. They're much easier to follow, and especially the notation of where things are in the video. So if you wanted to jump forward or back. Any comments on the minutes, Chris?
So I'm trying to pull up
Allison?
everything. I did just find it by going to the town website.
I'll find the 924 packet.
Yeah, it's grouped in with the what's the word? Workshop.
Yeah.
I would move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, Tom. Okay, on to the consent agenda, which consists of, we've got victual and lodging licenses for Birchwood Camden, Blue Harbor House, Camden Island, Sea Dog Brew Pub, and Winona's Restaurant. Should we do these one at a time, or?
Ken?
Oh, for the consent
Yeah,
agenda?
because they're all,
So if for the consent agenda, unless there's
action to be
unless there's a need to pull one of them out, then it just
approved.
passes unless
Okay.
there's.
Okay, so everyone had a chance to look over what was in the packet with the designation of the registrar of voters, Peter Gross's appointment.
Oh, actually, yeah, I did want to talk about, can we pull off the registrar of voters and the appointment of the election warden?
Uh-huh.
One of the things that I've gotten a lot of feedback from people about is the intensity of the voting experience, and the after voting specifically, where after you vote and then you kind of have to go walk or run the gauntlet of many
Petition, signature
groups.
selectors.
Yeah, and I talked to Peter about this a little bit last time too, and he said, "Oh yeah, thank you for saying something. It's been a real challenge to keep them back. Ideally, everybody would just be sitting behind a table, but it's gotten a little bit out of hand, in my opinion, where people are coming out in front of the table. There's not really very much room to walk. You're getting bombarded with things, and I'm not saying it's everybody, but I've had enough people say they just really, I think people should be able to go and vote and comfortably walk out. And if there's enough room for there to be tables there, that's fine, but it should take the people that are voting actively going and seeking them out. So I don't know if there's another time to, my understanding is that once we appoint an election warden, that we don't have any say over this. Is there a way to have this conversation about sort of a policy around that?
I mean, it's really something that has just been at the discretion of the town clerk. And really, it's a first come, first served. And if they have enough room and all that it really has grown in recent years. And I've received a lot of complaints in my office about it as well. I think that this might be, it's going to be a really busy election in November. So it might be, something that, we want to think twice as to whether or not it's in the polling station on that day, given how busy it's going to be already and how difficult it's going to be for, the election warden just to kind of help, and the election warden and everybody else involved to move everyone through the polling station.
But you're right, running that gauntlet at the end is kind of strange.
Yeah, and it's just,
But I just want to make sure we don't run afoul of anybody's, First Amendment rights to be collecting signatures or as petitioners, whether or not, having them obviously having them somewhere else so that voters don't feel intimidated or put upon. I can certainly appreciate that. So is that a conversation with Katrina as to how it might be set up differently or to limit the number there?
it's
Well,
already
maybe-
limited is the thing. And so
It's limited
but
by
I
the
don't know
number
that
of
there's never
tables.
been a conversation about what the appropriate number is or whether it should just be first come, first serve. Should town committees have a preference? Should registered petitions collecting signatures there is historically sometimes more demand than space. And so I don't know about getting into all these criteria. It might just be easier to.
But the item on the agenda isn't about that. The item on the agenda is about appointment of Peter Gross or not as the election warden. Is this a different conversation about whatever you call the group of folks who are trying to get other things signed? That's something different.
You're
Unless
right.
you're saying that
I don't know if
the
it is
issue
something
with
different.
Peter Gross is what's causing this.
Oh,
I mean, this
gosh,
is
well.
about item number C, confirmation of the town clerk's appointment of Peter Gross.
Well, I'm asking if this is the opportunity to have that conversation, or because my understanding is the election warden becomes powerful. I'm asking, I don't know who makes those decisions about who can be in the polling place and how we're going to allocate space. I would like to have a
Right,
conversation.
and that's it's really at the discretion of the town clerk. So not the election warden.
So could we have,
It probably sounds like
we
a
could
good.
have the conversation separately at a different time, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
because
Yeah.
these two agenda
On an
items,
agenda.
these two agenda items
Yes.
don't address that.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely have that. It sounds like a great agenda item for the next meeting.
Perfect, as long as we're not, I don't want to, was just making sure we're not going to be told at some other time.
Oh, sorry,
no,
we can't do that. because
That's
he's-
totally under the jurisdiction of the election warden,
Right.
which I still kind of think it might be, but,
So let's make a note of that to see if we can,
That is an agenda item for
I'd
the
just
next
like
meeting.
to know what other towns do, if there's a system that might work better.
It's a spacious room, so if it's up to between the Katrina and Peter, they might be able to reconfigure it and open up the space so doesn't feel like a gauntlet at the end.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, I don't
Oh,
know.
it's-
I mean,
it's a
the
great
polling
point.
place has to be set up in a certain way for certain reasons. So there's a reason why they're placed where they are and that everybody has to run the gauntlet. So I think that, we can certainly talk about policy around tabling and what you all might like to recommend instead.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
perfect.
sounds like a good
Future
thing
agenda item.
for the
Okay.
next meeting.
so otherwise the consent agenda,
The last item is item D, and I think that could have a little bit of clarification on the approval of the bid for the bond anticipation note being simply a consent agenda item. I would think, let's move that if we can. Can we move 3D down to an action item instead? Is there any rule against that?
Not at all.
And make it a 4, move 3D to make it a 4B, please.
okay? We can do that.
Because there's some comments and questions and discussion
Yeah,
that
I
might be
saw
good to
your-
have.
Yeah,
And
I saw
then
your email.
drive on.
Okay, so then the consent agenda of A, B, and C.
I'll make a move to approve the consent agenda for items A, B, and C.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Technically don't have to vote on it, but
Okay.
never hurts.
Okay. Oh,
Just,
Okay, thank you.
I don't,
catching up here. Okay, so on the action items, we have the committee appointments for the Camden Rock Report Pathways and the Midco Solid Waste. And that was in light of a couple of changes that came about regarding
Well-
membership.
Yeah, because it wasn't, the Pathways, was that the one that we had an alternate that was in there? Is that the one that Gary's an alternate on the Pathways? Is that group?
oh, yes.
So why would it not be the alternate? Or
I,
is that what Lindsay's trying to be here? Is she trying to be the alternate?
I
What's-
doubt Lindsay is driving this, but I think we just had a Pathways Committee meeting. I was there for part of it. I don't know why I was a little surprised to see this on the agenda. Lindsay's great, and she's been coming to some meetings. It's not clear to me whether we have space or not.
Yeah,
And so like, I would say we can just table that to get clarification. Gary's been coming too, who's really great. Obviously we talked about this enough. There was enough confusion before.
yeah. Was
I'm
there
not
somebody
sure.
that resigned from the committee in the last 2 weeks or so?
Not that I'm aware of. This agenda item wasn't discussed with me.
Me, no.
I think it was Jeff Scott, I'm imagining, asked somebody to put it on the agenda.
Yeah, and I didn't
Well,
ask
if you
Janice
know, then-
beforehand if there had been a resignation, if we were one short, and whether or not it was an alternate or a standing member. So if you'd like all those
What'd she say?
questions answered, it's fair enough to table it.
Yeah, I think
I also don't think it's going to interfere with anything they need to do.
it's definitely not.
And then
I would move to table this and, I guess it's all one.
Well, it's one, well, you can at least
It
say-
really should be two agenda
Yes,
items
it
also
should.
because, so Midco Solid Waste is not a committee. It's, and we need to do an appointment for a set period of time. I was
Mhm.
appointed to a 3-year term last year.
Mhm.
So what would be doing is voting to appoint somebody for a 3-year term.
Right.
Um,
And this was pursuant to our conversation at the last meeting where you indicated that you were willing to entertain someone from a
Community.
non-elected
Yeah.
member. And we did get an interest from Greg Dorr, who
Yeah.
happens to be my husband.
Yeah, that agenda item did not come as a surprise to me, so thank you.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
All these surprises around.
sorry, I wasn't trying to be
It's okay.
too.
I think agendas aren't supposed to be a surprise, just that there's a time frame when they're supposed to be out, according to our charter.
I'm guessing there was a little Pathways Committee advocacy somewhere for like getting something on the agenda quickly, and that's what happened. I don't really know.
We discussed this agenda at our last meeting as to what was going to be on it. So the suggestion that the agenda was not
Right.
transparent is not what happened here. So this item, we can make an appointment.
Were there any other people who applied for the position, or is this the total number of people who applied?
Total number of people who applied.
We had a meeting. Greg did come to our meeting and sat in the audience and listened. I'm glad that he still wants to do it, or I guess I'm glad that he still wants to do it after sitting through the meeting. We have many new people. I think Greg, as a former city attorney for Rockland that has a landfill that's very similar to ours and a general interest in the area. I think Greg would be a great choice. The way that this works, just so that everybody's aware.
Can I just slow you down just a
Sure.
second? I'm not familiar as much with his experience in Rockland. Maybe just so that everybody is aware of what his experience is, you can describe it the relevance between what he did before and looking at what he's doing now.
And
It
I'd
might
be happy to talk about that as the
Yeah, I'll
former
let Audra do that.
Rockland city manager and
Oh, yeah,
familiar
I was
with
going
both
to say,
facilities.
I only know that he was the Rockland city attorney and that they have a landfill, and all landfills like ours and Rockland's have some legal issues. One of the things that we need to get done at Midco Solid Waste is to have a schedule of compliance. Ideally, our interlocal agreement is very outdated. And it's long been a discussion with the board members on Midco Solid Waste. You know, we should really fix some of these things. We've updated our bylaws, but a change to the interlocal agreement actually requires voter approval in all 4 towns. So every time that we get to the point where we go through some things that should possibly be changed, we end up stalling because it's a lot of work, basically.
Mhm.
And so having somebody that could help us with that a little bit would be useful. The way it works also is that if it's a non-select board member that is appointed, our interlocal agreement provides for that. It also provides for the select board is able to remove their representative at any time too. So although it says a 3-year appointment, the select board can change their mind. But we've historically had a lot of trouble getting people that want to stay on Midco Solid Waste Ken's laughing, for an extended period of time. It's rare for somebody to be able to serve out that 3-year period, because it ends up getting treated in each of the 4 towns, just like this committee thing where you think you're signing up to be the liaison to the Pathways Committee, and you're actually on a board with committees. And then usually when people get off of the select board in one of their respective towns, they also leave the Midco Solid Waste Board. So I think it would be, I think at the very least, Greg understands that, you know, commitment and is willing to help us. And but Audra had.
Sure, yeah. So Greg and I never overlapped, but you know, he was in Rockland as the city attorney there at a time where they were having significant challenges with their quarry landfill. They had lots of odor problems. They had far greater odor problems than we have at our facility because of the nature of the industrial users who were landfilling material into that facility for years. And you know, then the solid waste issues. It was incredibly complicated in terms of the way that landfills are regulated doesn't match up very neatly with these quarry landfills that are quite a different issue and present a whole different set of environmental considerations. And Greg was in the thick of that with, you know, negotiating with DEP consent agreements and plans for, you know, how they were managed and operated and compliance issues. I believe Greg was there at the time when the city of Rockland needed to go to the state legislature because there were rules around, like I said, you know, other landfills that didn't line up with quarry landfills. So a lot of background and knowledge with a much more extreme example and a much more
was about to say, we
complicated
don't have-
example. We're not as extreme and complicated as the city of Rockland, but they are similar in terms of their quarry landfills. So it's like, you know, imagine throwing a bunch of trash in a bathtub and, you know, it's different than other ones.
Now,
So-
the 7 years that he was there, what years were those? Do you know?
Oh, Susan knows that. I don't. I just saw his
Yeah, it
name on a
was,
lot of the documentation.
1998 to 2005.
Yeah.
I
maybe going through some
you know, I
issues
think
then.
he's a volunteer at the Restore too, at the Habitat for Humanity Restore.
Yeah.
So that, I hope that turns out to be a greater asset than, you know, fighting with the DEP about closure agreements. And we can focus on things like, you know, better coordinating with the Habitat for Humanity Restore at the swap shop and, you know.
I just think it'll be kind of nice for him to finally see like an example of like the completion of the stuff that he was trying to work towards in Rockland.
How's Rockland doing now?
They're closing. They're closing their landfill.
Yeah, it's all been
I know
capped.
they're
Yeah.
covering it up and
Yep. They had to reopen it, and so anyway, it's capped now, and they're ready to yeah, move forward the final closure.
So
Smells
it's
a
all
lot better than it
transfer.
used to.
Smells a lot better than it used to.
That's really,
That's why Dave St. Laurent has been helpful too for this one, because he helped solve a lot of the problems in Rockland. And one of the things that we haven't been able to get managers or people on the board that understand this quarry landfill situation. It's just,
It's very
it's
unique.
very different. It creates all these water problems. It takes a long time to wrap your head around it. And people that might have excelled at being a transfer station manager or really interested in recycling somewhere else, or they end up on our board or as part of our staff, and they are faced with this whole different set of problems, which is, out of their wheelhouse. So,
Mhm.
Okay.
we try to steal people from Rockland now, I guess.
Is there anything else that the people of Camden should know?
Camden resident.
Yeah, should they know, is there anything more they should know about why he's the right guy?
I would say in general, these are really, really difficult positions to fill because it is it's a commitment. And I think that it's a commitment more in terms of a willingness to do background research and understand the issues and problem solve and all the time that it takes to get to a point where you can do that. So I think that, if we have a willing and interested community member who has, background knowledge in this and is willing to put in the work, that's
And
just really
is he
fantastic.
retired now? Is that the
yeah,
deal?
says right in there, retired.
Also, for anybody interested, tomorrow, instead of a regular board meeting, we're having a workshop for Midco Solid Waste, which is going to be held at the facility at 2. So there are a lot of new board members, and we're doing a tour of the grounds. And so there's probably not room for 100 people to join, but if anybody's interested in tagging along, that is open as well. The facility's open during that time too. Are we ready for a motion?
Mhm.
I would move that we appoint Greg Dorr to a 3-year term on the Mid-Coast Solid Waste Board of Directors.
Sure, I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Can I vote?
No.
No. Okay.
No,
All right. 4 in favor and 1 abstention. Okay. So going on to the consent agenda item that got moved to an action item, approval of the bid for the bond anticipation note.
And on that, I just want to make sure that people understand, what this means if we go ahead and approve this part of it, which is essentially a loan, right? It's probably more similar to a home equity loan where you only take out
Or
part-
gap financing, yep.
of part of what you do. So if we go ahead and approve this, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't give the town a blank check of $12 million. What it does is that it sets it up so that we can approve projects as we go, right?
Yes.
So that
yep.
any projects that get approved that are in the, no pun intended, pipeline, that for the infrastructure elements of this, that those projects and the expense of that is going to get approved at the select board, right? And then how is the money being tracked? That's okay. We got $12.5 million. It's like it's a lot. And how is that? How does that get tracked?
All right, so I guess to go back a little bit,
Yep.
it's a $10 million bond anticipation note. So this is gap financing between, having money to start up these projects that we've been talking about, and when we actually bond the money, because you have 2 years from when the money is bonded to spend it, and we don't want to take out multiple bonds. So this will be a 2-year period to do that $10 million worth of work. And
So does all work have to be done
within the 2-year
in the
period.
2 years?
Yeah, within that 2-year period. And there's different ways that we can, renegotiate if we need to with different financing options. So it's not doom if we don't quite make it.
Yep.
So what we're going to be doing from a finance side of things, we're going to be setting up a special fund because there's, of this $12.5 million bond, there's a number of projects within it. And in addition to the bond, money that we're going to be expending for it, there's also, grants that will be, leveraging that money with, that will be funding,
Right,
part
so
of these
you-
projects.
So in short, we might get more bang for the buck because we've got,
Oh, yeah, we're going
we're
to
gonna
be.
have matching funds. for
Right, and
certain
we already
things.
have money for like, the Molyneux Road sewer extension. We already have money for John Street from external sources. So what we're going to be doing for all of these projects, we're going to be setting up a separate fund and then, individual projects that can be tracked and accounted for, revenues and expenses, for each of the individual projects. And with the select board, you'll have all the bids for these projects will come to you to approve. So when we do, sort of big bid specs and packages and we get responses back, ultimately that goes back to the select board to, we'll give you a recommendation, but you approve the final bid. And then, when the contractor's engaged and the work is actually being done, all of the invoices will be part of the AP warrants that you sign. So if you want that level of looking at the, invoices, you'll be able to do that as well.
What would be nice, but sometimes it's hard, and I think it's happened a little bit with FB, is yes, we see the billing each month, but we don't see its, I'll say, growth over time. We don't see that, oh, we've spent thus far, okay, we got this bill this month is, I don't know, $12,000, if we're spending $12,000 a month, we don't see that, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, we've been doing that for so long. We don't have any sort of accounting that says, oh yeah, of that $100,000 that we had set aside or whatever, that, now we're at X percent compared to where the project is supposed to be. We don't see that by doing the individual invoice things. I don't know if there's anything that could be done to better kind of show that tracking over time with the project invoice.
Well, I guess, we talked about this when we had that workshop. It's, most
possible?
of the select board said that your preference was that you wanted milestone updates,
Yeah.
and we can do milestone financial updates as well.
Okay.
So that when we hit project milestones where we're tracking in terms of, the finances of the project in addition to, completion of certain, major.
I just think with some of the concerns that there's been in the past of different projects that we've done or budgets, I know the budgets all got approved overwhelmingly, but still, I think it's good for the visibility to see, okay, this is where XYZ project is and we're at this, and we are on target or we're not on target, and it's just, it's good to know. It can either be confirming or alarming or make you feel good, one or the other. But something concrete would be nice, if it's possible, without being overburdensome.
I like it.
And just so you know, to be clear too, I can't vote on this because of certain client relationships that I have in the ones that are. So my
Okay.
reason for abstaining has to be because of my client relationships
Okay,
and not because I don't like the idea.
okay, great. Thank you for the clarification, though. I
Yeah.
think it's
It's
in the
important.
interest of transparency for the town and
Mhm.
so, and all of the projects that are involved are things that people are going to be very interested in knowing about, and they're going to be impacting our lives substantively anyway, on the ground. And
But when it comes to selection of certain financial institutions, I think it's best if I don't.
no, I'm
Yeah.
not disputing that. But I appreciate the notion of having
Milestone
updates.
financial
I
updates.
think it'll be really
Yeah.
good for the public to understand how these things are going. So if it's not too onerous and we can
Yeah.
Right.
slide that into your reporting, that would be great. So do we have to have an actual vote on it because we moved it? So we'll have a motion. We've got, yes, would you like to? You may come to the, press the button so it,
Chris Moran, Camden.
thank you.
I was a little surprised to see this on the agenda tonight. And the reason that I was surprised is that I went back and looked at the budget committee meeting back in March and then the select board meeting in April. And our public works director said point blank that it was going to be 5 to 7 years that it was going to take for these projects to be completed. And for 5 to 7 years, and now we're hearing that it's going to be done in 2 years. And then at that March budget committee meeting, there was virtually no vetting or no discussion at all. I went back and I looked and watched all of the meetings, the 2 meetings that I watched. I printed off the transcription of those meetings. And I was sort of a little upset, concerned that there was no discussion by the budget committee. And then when we got to the select board meeting, there was, look at the agenda, there was no amount listed, there was no backup materials. And I found that to be very odd. And at that same meeting on April 2nd, Stephanie French requested the slides from the presentation and the proposed language would be put into the minutes that are viewable for the people. But they never showed up into those minutes. And then at that meeting, Chris, you specifically requested, wanted to know why it wasn't brought up until the conclusion of that budget committee meeting. And I was literally quite shocked at some of the answers that were given. Audra, you responded by stating that there was a very limited amount of time. Allison, you stated that they didn't want to stay and talk about it. Audra, then you again stated that it's really hard after 8 o'clock to do anything. And Tom, you stated that the co-chairs of the budget committee were very hard on 8 o'clock and it was their committee. Allison, you went on to state that this was a wastewater budget issue and we haven't done the wastewater budget yet. I just find that whole reasoning very disconcerting. And so given that this bond request was approved by the voters and with the tax bills now out, would somebody here please explain to me who's going to be paying the debt service on this bond?
So it's going to be a combination of ratepayers and taxpayers.
So what's the town charter say?
The town charter says that ratepayers can pay for wastewater debt and taxpayers can pay for either.
I printed off the charter and I could be wrong, and so you can correct me. This says funded, the funding says funded through the use of the wastewater department's capital reserves, user service charges, or use of bonds and other loan sources. The debt service may be repaid through user service charges. Operational costs says will be derived solely from user service charges and not from property taxation. So where in the charter does it say that we can put it to the general fund,
Put what to the general fund?
paying for this debt service?
We pay for debt service all the time for capital projects.
But my point is that the town charter says, and Allison, you indicated it into your,
Oh, yeah, this is one of my favorite topics.
and so in my opinion, for what it's worth, in order for it to be a combination of ratepayers and general fund, we could have a town charter change.
I think
No,
we
we've
did have a
already
town charter
done
change.
that.
We
Yeah,
already
we've already
did that.
done
So
that.
Yes, you changed it to allow to get the funding for the last upgrade. So everything's gonna be paid for by the ratepayers, the users.
they added a little of nuance to that. So it's just like what you just read. And we have talked about this quite a bit, that the town can vote to subsidize the wastewater.
Where does it
Right.
say, where does it say
We
that?
did that for years and years. It says
No.
may. It doesn't say must. It says may.
But I think
What, I'm just curious, what do you, so I think this is a huge issue that we
it
haven't,
is.
but it's at this point, right, what it says right now is that, wastewater, what the practice has been is this switch to wastewater customers paying everything, right? And so that's why we've seen the big increases, and historically our rates were much lower than average. And so they're coming up now. I'm personally imagining that there's going to be a time when if we continue this, that's going to start to feel uncomfortable for users, and that it's probably going to force a conversation of, okay, how much of these big projects should be financed by taxpayers? But it'll be the select board at the time that is going to decide some
No,
of that.
the town charter.
It isn't set up that way, Chris.
Yes,
I
it
know.
is.
No, it's
You
not.
think that the town charter now prohibits using any taxpayer money for,
No, that's
Anything
not what I'm
wastewater?
saying. I will actually.
He thinks it's laid out very specifically who pays for what in the town charter, and it's
Right.
just not. It's just not, Chris. I'm
So-
sorry.
I'm going to have
Tell
to.
me how it's not, please.
It's not in that it says capital improvements may be funded through the use of wastewater department's capital reserves. May is the
Right,
important
may,
word.
Capital
May.
reserves, one.
Wastewater department's capital reserves, user service charges, or use of bonds,
Three.
and other loan sources. Other loan sources could be the general fund loaning.
Oh,
It
you're
could be.
really stretching this out.
I am
No,
not
but it's the
stretching it.
May, it's the May
It's
part.
the May.
No. I
Let's-
completely disagree with that.
I mean, you
And
can
it's so-
disagree, but in reality, the truth is we've always had the ability to, we always did fund it through the general fund.
Right.
And the way that the charter was rewritten, it was to give the flexibility. It was to enable us to be able to fund things through user rates, because everybody agreed that it was unfair that
So let-
taxpayers were
so
funding the,
let me-
please let me finish. You asked a question. I'm trying to answer it. That we could be able to fund capital improvements through user rates, because everybody agreed that our user rates were incredibly low, and they were incredibly low because of the fact that we didn't fund any of our capital upgrades through rates. So we created this flexibility in the charter to be able to do that, because it makes sense to do that a lot of times, because you can get a lot of benefits from
Okay.
funding projects with user rates paying for the debt service. However, you do come to a point where it might not be so beneficial to do that, because your user rates might just get so high that it's cost prohibitive to do capital upgrades.
Agreed. So what I
So
would.
we built in the flexibility to be able to also
But
use
that's
general
not what the-
fund.
That's not what it actually says. And so I go back to what you had mentioned, Allison, in that April 2nd meeting, that we changed the charter to accommodate the bond that we had to get to do the improvements. Correct?
I'm going to let Tom,
No, let me finish,
no,
please.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And so all I'm saying is I just want to make sure that we are doing this accordingly. So my one question is, because we changed the charter to get the financing, correct? That's what you told me. That's what you
Oh,
said.
yeah, I
Allison.
mean, and I actually
So-
disagreed with that at the time, but that's a larger.
So if we now change it back,
Don't need
is
to.
that going to be considered a default? And what are the consequences of those defaults?
We don't need to, because the word may was used, and it was used with very good reason, Chris.
You're really,
No one is stretching it. This
Yes, you
was
are.
purposefully done. It was, you should go back and watch the Charter Commission meetings. You
And
really
the town
should.
attorney has been over this. I've argued with him in the past about it. I do see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tom,
Thank you,
yeah.
Susan. So I'm reading the RFP from Jody, which is in the packet. And it clearly states that this isn't just for wastewater collection, this
That's-
municipal bond.
Yeah.
It's for multiple infrastructure improvements for the town.
Correct. That's another important point.
So, I mean, we're arguing semantics here that really aren't applicable. That's my opinion. There's a significant benefit for this bond, not just for the wastewater collection users, but for the entire town. And there's a significant argument to be made that even people who aren't using the wastewater collection system benefit from it because of the improved environmental consequences in the town. So the debate and the theoretical debate are kind of silly in my opinion.
Oh, I'm sorry you feel my concerns are silly. I'm sorry that you feel that way. So with this money, this $10 million that we're going to get, I know there's a drawdown and going to do it as needed, which sort of surprises me because at that last April 2nd meeting, you said it was going to be a lump sum. So now all of a sudden we're doing it as needed, which is, I think is great because then we're only going to pay interest as we're taking it. And I understand that concept. So this $10 million, are we going to be investing that when we're not using it? And when is the project's going to start? Because I go back to the fact that our public works director said there's going to be 5 to 7 years. And now all of a sudden we're going to have it John Street done, Mountainside. We're going to have it done in 2 years.
Those projects will be done in the whole thing will not be done in 2 years.
All right, I just want to make sure that we're doing this according to the town charter, and we'll make sure we're not going to jeopardize what we did a few years ago. And I don't want us to be in default of I don't know who ultimately gave, was it Farmers FHA?
USDA Rural
USDA,
Development.
yeah. And so I don't want us to jeopardize that. And,
There's no way that this could jeopardize that.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if I may ask just for some clarification, I was interested in Chris's note that the work will take 5 to 7 years, and yet the bond has to be repaid in 2 years.
No, not repaid. Not repaid.
Well, it matures in 2 years, and so how does that work?
So the bond anticipation note, so we have 2 years to spend that $10 million. We could do other things if we find that, there's an issue with the project, but let's put that to the side. So 2 years, and then we would go and we would get the actual bond for the 12.5 million, and it would pay off the bond anticipation note.
Okay.
And then we would move forward with that.
And the bond itself can be repaid over X number of years, 20 years?
It'll be a 30-year,
Yeah, okay.
30-year bond.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it has to be, it's not like a loan where you can pay early. Bonds, you have to pay over that 30-year period.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so nothing that we're doing is pushing us into some kind of a mandatory 2-year window.
No.
This is a little outside of my sphere, but that makes sense. Thank you for that question, Ken.
Yeah, this is borrowing money in anticipation of bonding for the full amount
Correct.
in order to get the projects underway.
Yep.
So any further question? We've had a motion.
Well, what people may not know is that you're going with a particular, maybe you could say a little bit about the details about what we'd be looking to approve as far as who, what, how much. I know it's in our packet, but just. so
Oh,
people
do you
can
mean
hear.
with the actual financial institutions?
Yes.
So the low bidder was Camden National Bank. So they had the lowest interest rate, and that was 5.131%. And fortunately, we do all of our banking through Camden National, so that's going to be a really easy relationship to administer. We've had other not bond anticipation notes. It was the gap financing for the treatment plant project, and KeyBank had the lowest interest rate, and we did not have any sort of other banking relationship with them. And that was, it wasn't impossible. It was more complicated than it's going to be very easy with Camden National Bank because of the fact that we hold all of our accounts with them currently. And I don't know if this will be helpful to Chris Morong's question. But, you know, when we sort of look at the breakdown of similar projects, because like Tom is saying, it's not just sewer infrastructure, it's also other, you know, infrastructure in the roadway. So when we looked at the breakdown for, you know, similar projects that they're going to be kind of comparable to the ones that we're doing, we're looking at about 4/5 of the cost being sewer related and 1/5 of the cost being, you know, other infrastructure related. You know, we'll have more information about this when we get to budget season. We do need to make some decision on debt service repayment about how we want to split this up. But I think, you know, generally moving forward, that's what we're kind of looking at, if that's how the select board chooses to, you know, finance the debt service on this in terms of the breakdown between general fund and wastewater.
Chris?
Just one last comment, I promise I'll give you guys alone. I just want to state, number one, that I don't disagree that any of this stuff needs to be done. In fact, I would make the argument we should have been doing this a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay? But my concern is just to make sure that all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And I've looked at the town charter, I've looked at a lot of different things. And again, is to make sure that we are legally in compliance. And if you look at our financial procedures out of our town charter, it talks specifically about tax anticipation borrowing guidelines, but it does not talk about bond anticipation. And so I go back to the fact that we need to make sure we're doing this right. And I just don't want.
So I think this will help with that. So when any time the town borrows any money at all, we have to get bond counsel for it, and they help us do all of that.
Mhm.
In addition to that, you know, our general counsel
Mhm.
also, you know, everything that you're saying right now, we run that all past them. So I really, you know, appreciate the points you're making. I just want you to know that this isn't just like myself and the finance director and the public works director putting this together. We have, you know, external resources in the form of specialized bond counsel.
Mhm.
And we also get help from the town attorney on all of this as well.
All right, sounds good. Then as long as you guys are comfortable, then I just hope you're all right.
I would move that we approve the bid from Camden National Bank for the bond anticipation note.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? One abstention? Okay. 4-0-1. I think
Move
that
to adjourn.
brings us to adjournment.
We're not doing town manager report, I guess, in this meeting or anything like that.
Well, we just wanted to shorten it because of all the time that we've already spent, but we have another meeting coming up in a week, so we'll have,
Right, this was supposed to be the
yeah,
flash
yeah, just
high-speed meeting, or I forget what we called it.
Business meeting only.
shortened.
Did we
so
do
that-
the license for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they unfortunately didn't get it in on time.
Oh, they
had
didn't?
Oh,
other,
no.
I think they had other state inspections and stuff like that.
No,
But
okay.
they have next week because,
But we're not slowing them down, so that's good.
Who's that, Winona's?
yeah.
Oh,
So we just told Rockport that we would put together a working group. Do we want to talk about that now or put that off?
Probably next meeting, well,
yeah,
What's the date of the next meeting?
October 1.
Week from today.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And, you know, I did see something, not that I'm doing doing a report, but I did see a couple of things out there with the McGonagall River Committee with putting together a public session on October 22nd, if I am correct. And that's a Tuesday, and then the following Wednesday as well. I think I have my days correct, yeah. October 22nd, October 30th, a public forum meeting. So this isn't an item on our agenda, it's just an advertisement there is a public meeting where otherwise it will be discussed, I guess, further in a update on October 1. But in case people were wondering what happened to that, that there will be 2 sessions at the middle school in the evening at 6 o'clock on October 22nd and October 30th, a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night, to discuss the
And was
3
this
different
just all email
drawings.
stuff, or
Say again? I
this is
couldn't
just
hear
all
you.
stuff going on over email, or?
Yeah,
feel
I
like
saw
maybe
it
they should-
today. I
Did
know.
they put something out publicly, or?
Since there wasn't anything like that, I figured I might as well let people know, because I didn't see anything out publicly about it either. But without advertising. So, yeah, this is an unsolicited ad. I happened to see it. And it looks like they're trying to drive ahead with having a public discussion. So I figured I might as well mention it. So better chance of getting more public there. And then maybe it'll be more follow-up on the Camden site concerning that. It's an important issue. I would think it would be. But again, there wasn't on the agenda item, the town, any reports, but I thought, so I'm sorry if I'm out of line, because I'm out of line with the agenda. But I thought that was an important item that I saw it, I think yesterday or today. I can't remember which day it was. But
Oh, no, I was just wondering if you saw that like on some kind of group email, or if
no,
you saw that in the paper somewhere.
oh, no.
That was my
I saw it.
question, like-
Oh, yeah, it seemed like it was a discussion and a decision made by the McGonagall River Committee to go ahead and do that.
Oh.
When I read it, granted, I read it quickly, but I don't think it was, oh, gee, I proposed that we're going to do that. It seemed like there was agreement and they were going forward with that.
Yeah, I mean,
Am I
I don't
correct?
know how official it is yet. I think they're still
Okay.
kind of putting together details.
All right,
So I think,
More-
by the
hopefully-
time we meet next week, we'll be able to,
that would be good.
yeah.
Because people want to have discussions, and we want people to be part and feel like they can be part of the discussion. So
Mhm.
if they're doing that, then that's awesome. The more the merrier.
But we should probably try to let them, the committee, do their thing too. And
This is what
I mean, I would,
This is
I'd
all,
love to
this
get
is
out
all
here.
driven by them.
Okay.
So
Great.
Yeah.
they're taking a lot of ownership over this, which is great.
Okay, we had a motion to adjourn in a second. Things ran a bit amok. All those in favor of adjournment? None opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, Tom.
Good night, everyone.